Dr. Will Tuttle, hey, sorry about that. So if you're watching this, wherever you're watching it, we tried to do Instagram, but it looked like it blocked us from being able to do a live together. I don't know if
Right.
it's technical issues or we're actually being censored. I'm not sure. I hate to think that we are, but I appreciate you being here. And so I just, Dr. Tuttle, to get started, can you just tell us about this event that you got coming up? I think it's the Vegan Freedom and Truth Summit, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you so much, Dr. Ben. And yeah, the summit that's coming up on October 15th to 17th, it's an online summit. It's called the Worldwide Vegan Summit for Truth and Freedom. And it's basically, we're bringing together some noted leaders in the vegan movement that have also been willing to be advocates and outspoken promoters of health freedom and for the truth that what we're facing in many ways is an unbridled attack on humanity right now by the pharmaceutical, medical, I call it the military, industrial, meat, medical, pharmaceutical, media, banking complex. You know, we have this big complex, and we're seeing a big rollout right now of a medical takeover. So I think it's great that we have some people who are willing to speak up on this because it's a pretty controversial subject, but it's very important that we address it, I think, not only in the world at large, but in the vegan community as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, you know, just as it's put a schism in most communities, it's put a schism in the vegan community. There seems to be, you know, two sides of the fence on this, and people land pretty clearly on one or the other. Before we get into that, I just want people to get to know you a little bit more, because I know that you've written books, you've been involved in health freedom and world peace and vegan diets and making the world a better place for like a long time now. So can you just kind of give us, everybody, your background on all that?
All right, sure. Yeah, I went vegan back in 1980, so that's been 41 years ago. And I have to say, some people say, well, I don't know about veganism in the long term, if you can really be long-term healthy. And I can say it's great. It gets better every day, every year, it gets better. And I'm now almost 70 and running around like when I was 20, and I have not been to a pharmacy or a drugstore for 48 years. So I just stay out of the medical establishment completely. But I always say, I think veganism is the smartest thing anyone can do in terms of just being a force for not only your own health, but for the health of the planet, for other people, for animals, for future generations, for slaughterhouse workers. It's just on every level. Indigenous people, if we want to make a positive impact with your life, the best way is to show compassion and kindness and respect to yourself and to other living beings. And animal agriculture is the absolute antithesis of that. Animal agriculture is based on dominating and exploiting and oppressing other living beings, stealing from them, sexually abusing them, and then eating that. And it concentrates toxins. It's absolutely unsustainable. And when we exploit animals, we end up getting exploited ourselves. I used to teach college courses in comparative religion, and the basic spiritual teaching on this planet is whatever you do to others will happen to you. Whatever we sow, so shall we reap. The basic golden rule really applies not only to human beings, but to all living beings. And so our culture is in a crisis. We have 10,000 years of dominating and exploiting animals, and it's really coming back now. And as we enslave cows and pigs and chickens and force medicate them and track them and microchip them and imprison them, we're finding the same thing now being rolled out to us. The way we look at cows and pigs and chickens are the way certain elites look at the mass of humanity. And we better understand that and stop exploiting animals, because if we enslave them, we're sowing the seeds for our own enslavement, and open our hearts to the inner wisdom of our natural intelligence before we were dumbed down by the educational system and by the food system in this country. We really have to reclaim our intelligence.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And, you know, this whole thing about what you're saying about what we do to animals. Now we have the medical, pharmaceutical, military, banking, industrial complex. I probably didn't even get all the names. Essentially doing that to us.
Right.
And
exactly.
So it's like, guys like you and I see it. We're like, okay, it's glaring. Like I've been here before, right? I've done this. I've fought for this. It's just happening at a different level, but it's the same game being played, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it is. And I've known from the very beginning, well, not from the very beginning, but I mean, I've learned along the way. I've been a vegan activist for 40 years, and I've learned through a lot of in-depth investigation that the greatest enemy of veganism, and really the greatest enemy that we have in terms of our environment and our happiness, is the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry is a subset of the chemical industry. The chemical industry is a subset of the petroleum industry. The petrochemical industry created the petroleum based chemical industry, and is now spewing massive quantities of pesticide, herbicide, fungicides all over the planet in an agriculture with GMOs that's wiping out species and destroying habitat. And a subset of that is the pharmaceutical industry, where we actually inject these chemicals right into people through injections and through pills and so forth. And so it's really about creating disease. There's a lot of money to be made in sick people. I am the worst nightmare for the pharmaceutical industry. I'm a person who's taken responsibility for my health over the last 48 years. I've not gone to a doctor, have not had health insurance. I just don't need Right Guard and Rolaids and Alka-Seltzer or whatever it is they have in pharmacies. And so I think what we're called to do now is to realize that the pharmaceutical industry makes massive profits on the drugs that they sell that are all injected into imprisoned animals. Most people don't realize the huge profit that goes to the pharmaceutical industry for the over 10,000 different drugs and hormones, chemicals and antibiotics that are inflicted on imprisoned cows, pigs, chickens, turkeys, ducks, geese, and factory farm fish. And so they're making massive profits on all these drugs for these animals. Then people eat the flesh and secretions of these animals that concentrate all these hormones and drugs and antibiotics. And then they get sick with cancer, of course, and heart disease and liver disease and kidney disease and osteoporosis and diabetes and all these conditions that come from eating these foods. And so then the pharmaceutical industry makes huge profits on the drugs to help control, so to speak, these diseases. But then there's a third aspect to their profits, which is the massive profits that the pharmaceutical industry makes from the drugs that they sell for mental illness for human beings, depression, anxiety, frustration, insomnia, and so forth. And again, it's as we sow, so shall we reap. We have these animals, of course, living in conditions that are absolutely horrendous and literally banging their heads against the bars in frustration and depression and anxiety and insomnia. So we sow those seeds and we reap the same thing in ourselves. And of course, the pharmaceutical industry laughs all the way to the bank at how what's the word? I mean, how gullible we are to actually go along with such a destructive program where we sicken ourselves, destroy our planet, ruin any chances we have for peace and harmony, waste all our resources, have people starving because most of the food we're feeding to animals while people go hungry, creating the foundations for war and conflict. And it's all very obvious, really, when you just step back a little bit and look at it. And so it's really time for us, if we're really serious about liberation and freedom for ourselves, to give liberation and freedom and health to these animals who have interests that are to them as important to them as our interests are to us. So this is the great lesson I'm hoping humanity will finally learn from this, because I've been talking about this for decades.
Yeah, and you and I see the correlation, or the how it's the same thing. I used to live in Berkeley. I was a member of DXE for a while. One struggle, one fight, human freedom, animal rights is what we always said. And now it's like, it's been going on for animals for 10,000 years, but now we're really seeing it come down on humans. And for some reason, people in the vegan community can't always make the connection. But let's get into the event. I want to like let people know, like, what can they expect? What can they get out of it? Why should they sign up? Who's going to be there? Like, tell us more about the event that's coming up.
Yeah, sure. That's great. Yeah. So the event I've been feeling for months, actually since the very beginning of this, when I realized that the vegan community was drinking the Kool-Aid on this whole thing, that it would be good to try to help raise awareness among vegans and really the general population. So the people that I've learned over the last few months the last year and a half, who are in the vegan community who are really visibly speaking out. There's quite a few vegans who are doing that. And so I'm interviewing them from October 15th to 17th. Dr. Gabriel Cousins, who's based in Israel. He's actually an MD from Cornell University. Actually, I think his medical license was taken from him, which is to his credit. He's been a longtime proponent of a vegan diet and healthy living and questioning the official narratives in the medical industry. We have Dr. Brian Clement, who is the executive director of Hippocrates Health Institute, which is the premier vegan healing institution, probably not only in the United States, but probably in the world, and based in West Palm Beach, Florida. So he'll be sharing. These are very powerful presentations. And then we also have Dr. Pam Popper, who's a naturopathic doctor based in Ohio, who's been a Make Americans Free Again, and she's been an outspoken proponent of health freedom as well. We also have Dr. T. Colin Campbell, who is considered by many people to be the premier nutrition expert in the whole world. He's also outspoken for academic freedom, for health freedom. He understands very clearly how the pharmaceutical complex has corrupted governmental agencies and corrupted academia. He talks a lot about the loss of academic freedom and how money buys science. Basically, people say, oh, the science is settled. We know what the scientists think. They all agree. I mean, that's nothing but pure censorship, and it's lies. And there's no such thing as science being settled about anything. So he's really understands science. So it's great to have him with us. We have Dr. Rupa Shah from from India, who's a vegan doctor who also she's an allopathic doctor who uses no pharmaceutical medications of any kind. It's all vegan, never tested on animals. And we have Claire Mann, who's well known for coining the word Vistopia, which is the book by the same name. And she's a social psychologist based in Australia who's a longtime vegan advocate and is speaking out strongly against the lockdowns and the mandates and all of that. And also Henna Maria, who's based in Spain, who's got millions of views on YouTube, speaking out on behalf of animals and behalf of humans and against what she calls the genocide of humanity, which this is ushering in. So also Joanne Farb, who's a longtime vegan advocate, and her daughter, Serena Farb, who was born vegan. Joanne Farb used to work for the pharmaceutical industry. So it's very interesting how she understands the link between the Department of Marketing in a pharmaceutical industry and the Department of Science within a pharmaceutical industry, and how the Department of Marketing uses the scientists in order to create the studies that they need to create the drugs that they want to fulfill. It's very illuminating because she's been on the inside of these pharmaceutical companies to understand that. There's also a wonderful couple named Don Lester and David Parker. They've written a book. They're vegans who live in England, and they've written a book that's called What Really Makes You Ill, that goes to the roots of vaccination and the germ theory and basically exposes the whole farce of the pharmaceutical industry and the idea that germs are what make us sick. And they say, actually, it's not germs that make us sick. It's really our body's cleansing, and symptoms are basically our body cleaning out. We also have Derek Broze, who's really well known now because he's the founder of the Greater Reset, which is a movement to question the Great Reset, which is being promoted by Fauci and Schwab and the World Economic Forum as a way to basically bring in AI and sort of a transhumanist agenda to depopulate the earth and reduce human beings to robotic status. So we have to realize that, as I warned about this in the World Peace Diet, that scientists are hard at work trying to create cows, pigs, chickens, and other animals that are dumbed down. So they're not frustrated by being hyper confined. They're not frustrated by anything. They're just willingly compliant no matter what, and they can be easily exploited. And I predicted if we don't watch what's happening, they're going to do the same thing, try to dumb us down in the same way so that we're willingly compliant to whatever kind of atrocities that they have in mind. and be exploited. And I think it's we can see this thing being rolled out. So these are all people who are sort of banging the drum to let's wake up here and have wonderful positive alternatives, ways of not only being healthy and thriving, as I know you're aware of, Dr. Ben, but also and creating a strong immune system and so forth, but also to not comply with what's happening and to create freedom cells, to become more proactive in linking up and resisting what's happening. That's really essential.
Yeah, wow. I mean, now that you tell me about it, I'm like, some of these talks are going to be amazing. I know, for example, Colin Campbell's been talking about academic freedom forever. I mean, he's trying to publish
Right.
plant-based nutrition 50 years ago, and he was getting pushback from the pharmaceutical industry and the scientific, consensus community then. So, I mean, like,
Right.
in the time, it's only gotten worse, right? So let me ask you this, and this is something I think about almost daily, is that obviously there are a bunch of vegans like you and I and the people we talked about who see what's coming, and they see kind of the pharmaceutical industry's dirty tricks in their playbook, and they see through it all like a very, very poor illusion. But we've got
Right.
a lot of vegans, and especially a lot of vegans, vegan physicians who, when it came to statin drugs and type 2 diabetes drugs and blood pressure and, all these pharmaceuticals that essentially are designed to treat diseases of affluence, diseases of lifestyle. And they can say, oh, no, a plant-based diet will reverse all that. You don't need any of the drugs. The pharmaceutical industry is actually evil. Now these people are coming around saying, oh, well, not really. Like, we need the pharmaceutical industry. We need to vaccinate everybody. Like the vaccines are safe and effective. Yeah, I know Pfizer's a criminal, and like they do all these other things that are bad with the statins and the blood pressure and all that. But with the vaccines, that's all the good drugs. That's all the good behavior. We got to trust this. We got to do this. If you speak out, you're an idiot. It's like a really bizarre cognitive dissonance I'm seeing going on. And I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that. Like these vegans, especially vegan doctors who kind of fell over on the other side of the fence, shook out on the other side of however you want to describe it. Like, what's going on there?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, virtually all of the vegan doctors basically have gone on the wrong side of the great divide, as we say. And I think there's a couple of reasons for it. Number one, you have to remember that in medical school, it's notorious that doctors do not get any training in nutrition, right? They don't get training in nutrition because they don't want them to know anything about nutrition. They want them to know how to basically be a drug pusher for the pharmaceutical industry. So they're taught protocols, they're taught programs and procedures and so forth to move drugs onto the population. And so that's what they're trained in. So they do not get any training in nutrition, which would help people actually be more healthy. So they would need the drugs. They also don't get any training in vaccinations. They don't know anything about vaccines. I mean, they get one class where they go through and they say, well, this is the vaccine schedule. And then we give them this one, this one, this one. And just know it's really good. It's the greatest miracle. Now let's get on to the real important stuff, which is the procedures and how to do the other stuff. So doctors, we look at doctors like they must know a lot about nutrition. We look at doctors like they must know a lot about vaccinations. They don't know anything. They know as much as the average person does. They don't know more than the average person, or less. Maybe they know even less usually. So that's one thing. Number two, we have to realize that the doctors, the vegan doctors in the vegan community are venerated because they establish legitimacy for the vegan movement. So we love the vegan doctors. We love the vegan MDs. They're the ones that kind of prove to the world that veganism and compassion for animals is also healthy. So we love them. So we trust them. So whatever they say, we're going to just go right along with it. Most vegans are like that. And then the third thing to understand is that the AMA has made no bones about this. The AMA is saying right now that any doctor, anyone who's an MD, right, who's under the AMA, speaking out against the vaccine protocols coming from the CDC will lose their license. So they're under a direct threat by there's something called the FSMB, the Federation of State Medical Boards. They have issued a statement that any health professionals or MDs, I think also RNs, if they question publicly or even privately the vaccine mandates and so forth that are being rolled out, that's grounds for them to lose their license. And there are people who have lost their license already over this. Paul Thomas in Oregon has lost his license, I think, and other people. So the problem is that most doctors are terrified of that, right? I mean, they're trained in only one thing. They only know one thing. They know how to do it to be a doctor. They don't know how to be a car mechanic or a carpenter or anything else. So if they lose their job, if they have their license taken away, they're done, you know. So they don't want that. So in a way, they're in a golden cage. They're just imprisoned within a system where they've learned to, unfortunately, sacrifice in many ways their integrity in order to have a good paycheck. They get a lot of money, but they don't look at it that way, I'm sure. But basically, they have to look at it that way. I mean, there's a saying, a very telling saying by the author of The Jungle, Upton Sinclair. He wrote, "The hardest thing in the world is to try to get someone to understand something when their salary depends upon them not understanding it." Right? That's the basic problem. So that's the problem with the vegan doctors, is their salary depends upon them not understanding the devastating impact of the whole agenda of vaccinations and everything else, and masking and all that stuff. And they get highly rewarded if they go along with the program, right? They get lots of rewards. So it's been quite an interesting experience for me to just sort of watch this charade unfold. But it's tragic. It's very disappointing. It's heartbreaking. It's agonizing. It's devastating to our movement. It's devastating to human beings. People are dying over this by the thousands, probably by a lot more than the thousands. I mean, it's absolutely destructive on every level to the social fabric of our society and to our health and to future generations. I mean, I just read, for example, a new study that came out from Brown University, where every year they test the IQs of little young kids, like 1 or 2 years old, and the IQs of kids for decades, it's always been constant around 100. That's sort of the average IQ for these little kids when they're about 1 or 2 years old. And they just now, the results are in for the newest batch of little kids. They did this studies in 2021, and these new little kids, instead of having the average IQ of 100 like normal, their IQ is now 78. And the average IQ of these little kids, because they're seeing masks all around them, and they're basically having their intelligence reduced, which again, of course, is to the advantage of these industries. I mean, that's what they want. They don't want people who are intelligent. They want people who are unintelligent, who don't make connections, will go along with protocols. And that's what this is doing. And the vegan doctors, really, I mean, they should be speaking up, but it's understandable. I mean, they're looking out for number one, and they've been so thoroughly indoctrinated anyway that it's hard for them to do that, I think. So we're on our own, really, on this.
All right. Well, I'm real excited about this event. Going to be a lot of good stuff on here. So can you just one last time, and I'll put a link I'll post it on YouTube, post it on Facebook and on Instagram, and there'll be a link for people to check it out. And it's free, right? But there's like a VIP version of it too.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's all free. If you'd like to get the VIP version, it's just a recording of all of the videos and audios, and we have a whole bunch of bonuses. That kind of helps pay for the whole back end. It's pretty expensive to put these things on. So we're hoping that some people will just love it so much that they'll get the recordings, because I think it really is good. And you can get them and you can share them with your friends. So that's the whole idea, just to get this word out there and share the recordings with other people.
All right, awesome. Well, I really appreciate you putting this together. Like you said, it's probably been no easy endeavor. If you ever do another one, or you want my help in any way, like let me know. I would be so happy to contribute.
Definitely.
Anything else that you want to, before we wrap it up here, just mention or any last words?
Thank you. No, I think we've covered it pretty well, Dr. Ben. You're fantastic what you're doing. I'm just becoming more aware of it now, and I will for sure keep you in mind. I want to thank all the people who are watching, listening, for your caring hearts. This is really about caring. Veganism is caring about not only our own little group, ourself, our family, but caring for our country and our community and our world and animals and future generations and ecosystems. It's caring about the freedoms that we need. How can we defend animals? How can we be a voice for animals if we are censored, if we don't even have free speech? How can we allow? I mean, I've seen so many vegans who have said, well, censorship's okay because the information that's being censored, it's misinformation. Like, who determines that? The next thing they'll say is, well, anybody who says that you don't need to eat a McDonald's, that's misinformation. I mean, how short-sighted can we possibly be to have vegans? Actually, I mean, there's vegans who are actually publicly endorsing the idea that vegans should report other vegans to the authorities if we question vaccines. I mean, this is so insane. I think the vegan movement has been infiltrated by shills for the pharmaceutical industry, and the vegan movement has also unfortunately been infiltrated by just gullible people who for some reason have bought into this narrative that in order to be healthy, we have to take drugs, which is completely antithetical to the deeper wisdom. I think it's within all of us that our health comes from living a life of purpose, from taking time to meditate and connect with nature and be creative and have healthy, harmonious relationships, eat organic, whole, plant-based foods, get plenty of exercise and sunshine and fresh air, live your life with joy. Life is an adventure. Don't buy into this idea of being safe. You don't build a beautiful ship to stay in the harbor. You build the ship to go out into the ocean and have an amazing adventure out in the dangerous ocean. Good, it's dangerous, but that's how life is. And it's a wonderful opportunity to be alive. And we're here to explore that together, and don't let them enslave us with this idea of safety, put us into cages. That's what they say about animals. They say, oh, it's much better for the cows to be in these prisons than if they were out in nature. They might get attacked by a coyote or a wolf. I mean, that only a slave would say that. So we really need to wake up out of all these narratives that are so toxic. And so thanks for the opportunity.
Well, yeah, and thank you for doing this because it sounds amazing. So it's the Vegan Worldwide Freedom
Summit for Truth and Freedom. Right. The
Okay.
Worldwide Vegan Summit for Truth and Freedom. That's it.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Tuttle.
Okay.
I'll put this up and let you know. Thanks for coming on today.
Great. Thanks.